So I want to start by framing what I want to say. I almost did a Facebook Live this morning. It was so, the impact point was so distinct. But I want to, I'm in the process of putting the 5 lessons of the Magi calls into independent purchase sections, so a person can just go in and buy one of them for their use if it relates to something they're experiencing. And I've always had this uncanny ability to compact some information and make it available before people get there. I'm sort of like the library at the end of the road, so to speak. And but I really feel so strongly about each lesson in the Magi is very succinctly part of one little mini magic book in the magical library. But one of the things, what happened to me when I went to sleep yesterday, day before yesterday, and yesterday into today, one of the Magi lessons was on recall and remembrance and memory. I strongly recommend purchasing that. I strongly recommend. I don't usually advertise, but I'm going to say it now so you'll see why I'm saying it at the end of what I want to share. So not last night, but the night before when I went to sleep, right before I woke up in the morning, I had a dream. I'm just going to do this dream short because it relates to the one I had this morning, which did not feel like a dream. So I had a dream, and one of my main totems there, although at the time I didn't register that it was my totem. And what happened was, in this dream, Jim Dempsey, who used to be my cook, who's very elfin, very otherworldly, in Ireland for my vision quest, he was driving like this Mercedes or BMW or Jaguar car that was a convertible. And I don't normally remember my dreams. My dreams, when I do remember them, they're impact points. And so as we were coming down in this bright, shiny red convertible, I saw that the mud dirt road in front of us was flooded by a rainstorm. So I yelled at Jim to be careful because his car is not designed to navigate in the mud. And as we headed for the dry part of the road, I noticed we were driving into about 20 bears, basically Shenandoah Valley bears, which are kind of gentle brown bears. And so I'm screaming at him to get his hood up on his convertible because they're coming to climb in the car. And there were 3 people in the car, and they actually got out of the car and ran, but I'd already had 2 bears climb in on top of me. They weren't. I wasn't frightened. They were just curious. Well, I wouldn't even say they're curious. They just wanted to crawl on top of me. So they weren't aggressive, but 200 pounds of brown fur, 2 of them, checking you out with claws has a certain fear factor to it. And I was afraid. I was genuinely afraid, but I was helpless. There was nothing I could do about it. And at some point, this odd thing happened, and I want to pick up on what other people said. Jill and all of you talked about new registers, that there's this new register that's independent of circumstance, independent of what's going on in the world around me. And, for the last 42 years, I've talked about new matrices and new futures rising, and we're now beginning to experience them, the kind of in the world but not of it, in the circumstantial world but not of the circumstantial world, really field phenomenon where each of us is a field being a field in our direct relationship with whatever we're directly related to. And since Joe was the last share, she was sharing what she was directly related to, that now was becoming what I would call like a living field, like it occurs as living, as not a personality doing something, but as being a living field or a living, an alive, vital, real experience, different than just doing something to fix something or because we believe in it, but it's actually vibrationally integrous. So right at the end of this dream, they absorbed me, and I remember it, but it was very distinct because I could feel every cell in my body getting furry, literally brown furry, and then I woke up, and it left me odd. The point is that for the whole day, I was fuzzy, not fuzzy in the head. I was that whole day yesterday, I couldn't get physical the way physical I knew I remembered vaguely, but whatever I considered a cellular hanging, whatever that was, this body wasn't, it was a furry, cellular, bare body, only not bare, just fuzzy, if everybody can kind of track me. So when I went to bed last night, I thought, wow, kind of what's happening. I was very excited about it because I know that there are three fundamental things happening right now. And if anybody saw my Facebook down, I'm dead serious about that. Facebook Live, I haven't got it posted. I did it on Zoom, so I haven't got it posted on Facebook or YouTube yet, but I will if I can figure out how. But the point is that there are three elements that are very clearly rising. One is electromagnetic. Well, maybe three, but one of them I don't have that much relationship with. The other one that's rising is the part of the mythic memory of human beings that actually could remember themselves, not as the figure of a bear, but the cellular vibrational component of the spirit that lays behind the creation of a bear. And then we have the mythical creatures, which is what I've been working with dragon and because when humanity started speaking, they mythicked. They found a way to relate to their unity with creation through story, and they identified mythic creatures that allowed certain part of their neural wiring to be able to sustain and maintain itself out beyond what we call human beings. In other words, we related as a mythic relationship with dragons and unicorns, for instance, while we could physically relate with bears and horses, and we could elementally relate with fairies and divas, but we used to have this multidimensional unity with creation, and of course, what Jill mentioned, and then we developed these cosmic relationships with which the chakras speak about, the above chakras and prayers, and that's all the cosmological relationship. Unicorns is somewhere in between. So when I went to bed last night, I was thinking about this, that I'm really not budging, because I know the health of a human being is when their neurological processor actually has these multi-layered dimensional capacity to literally experience themselves be in unity with whatever they're designed to be in unity with. And for me, there's part of it's the mythic creatures, part of it's the elemental world, part of it's the mother herself, part of it's electrical grid, part of it is particle grid, atomic grid, cellular grids. I have this multi-intelligence, but so do you too. So I went to sleep and I had this dream, but it wasn't a dream. I knew I was really there because I actually made myself feel the pews. It was the wooden pews in like a fundamentalist Baptist church where they wouldn't have danced or sung or played cards or anything like that. Very bare bones. And everybody's really stiff with me. And I was there to sing at a wedding. and I couldn't get anything out of anybody. So I understood I was with the musical director. They introduced me to him, and I asked him, I thought maybe we'd sing a duet. So I said to him, are you bass, baritone, or tenor? And he said to me, I am not open to full disclosure. And it jarred me because he was really kind of shutting me down. And and they invited me. It wasn't like I showed up there uninvited. So then a woman, kind of like if those of you that ever did church, like back folding the altar cloths and things. And I said to her, do you even know the name of the people getting married, or are you sure there's even a wedding? And she looked at me, and these kind of lizard, but don't get weird, it's not that lizard people talk about. It's these kind of lizard eyes, literally like how a lizard eyes up and closed, but she wasn't a lizard brain. But she was definitely not fully human. Looked at me, and she said, this wedding's been planned forever. So I had these two really weird statements, and I was trying to find a way. I was literally trying to find a way to find out if I was even supposed to show up or not. So I was in my I'm hired to sing mode. And sorry, I've got Alfie howling in the back because he's not home. So I said, well, do you have a date and a place and a time? And because I thought it was the next Sunday, she said, it's next Sunday, it's here, and the time's noon. I said, okay. So then I'm suddenly walking in the door, coming into the church to sing, and I've decided I want to sing, give yourself to love. If love is what you're after, open up your heart to tears and laughter. Give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. So I walk in, and it's no longer the church pews. I'm now seeing the altar on the side, not the front. And I'm walking into a reception hall, and the hall is full of fairies about maybe 2 to 3 inches high, hovering everywhere, and human beings and larger fairies, which were walking around, but they're still about 3 feet tall or flying fays, basically. And when I walk in there, everything makes sense to me. Everything, like why he said we are not open to full disclosure, made perfect sense. And then I understood, even though I didn't know what it meant, when the lizard-eyed lady said, this wedding's been forever. And I understood because the elemental world is largely eternal and immortal. So I was like really, but you could tell they were surprised that I wasn't weird. You could tell that they were surprised that I was like, oh, all right, this all makes sense. Plus, just to add what Janice said in the beginning, I after the bears all day yesterday, I was like, oh my goodness, everything's flowing in. Shasta's flowing in, come on in, Alfie. Multiple tendrils of creation are all flowing in and all kind of swirling into this into this toroidal field. And I'm having all this thinking, and then I see these two little creatures, little fairy, 2-inch, maybe 3-inch or 4-inch fairies, and they're on a very ornate, come on up, honey. They're on this very ornate table that's in front of the altar that's still very plain and very, very puritanical and very strict, very, that. So I walk up and I put my hand out for them to step up on my hand, and I say, and I noticed, because I was a little girl, one of my memories for those who have done Magi, one of my memories is of dressing little fairies in like these blooms of this plant. I would pull them off the plant and make skirts for the fairies, and then I pull leaves off and made pants and tops for the boys. And it's always been a memory that I related to it as it kept me sane when I was a child. with all the shit I went through. And then later on, when I went to Ireland, and I know that sentient experience gave me the ability for the Mimsies to connect with me and the other elements in, like I have a common capacity to relate to things that other people don't have, and all started when I was 4 and 5 years old. So that's how I related to the memory. So I have them in my hand, literally, and I'm saying to the couple, I want to ask you, do you know the song "Give Yourself to Love"? Because I'd like to sing it for you. And I may cry. And the little woman says to me, Diane, don't you recognize me? And I realized that she was the little fairy that I dressed when I was 4 and 5 years old. And I realized that the boy was one of the boys that I had dressed when I was 4 and 5 years old. And I realized, because I realized the fays and the fairies were watching me, that I was in the community of fairies and fays that had come to know me when I was 4 and had gotten to know me when I was 4 and 5 years old. And it was also there, like generations of them would be the technical term. And then she said, give yourself to love is perfect, Diane. Isn't that what you've always done? And then they started singing, all of them. This is like 1,000 voices of humans and fays and fairies. And it was like aurora borealis in the colors and in the sounds and in the texture of the voices. And all of a sudden, I was that 4 or 5 year old. I can remember sitting on, my mom used to put me in crinoline skirts, and I was totally on the ground. I was in complete recall. I was totally on the ground, feeling the little sticks that got stuck on my butt, and knowing I'd have to brush them off before my mom realized, and the dirt off my crinolines before I got in the house. I remember how glad I was to have I could feel my teeny tiny little fingers, my really teeny tiny little skinny legs and skinny arms, and I had curly hair, blonde hair. And I remember like fairies flying up to pull my hair out of my face and sitting on my shoulders. I mean, it was complete recall, just completely of every level of sensory experience you can ever imagine. I mean, just completely no separation between myself and the body I had at that time and the reality I was in under it was like a bush tree that I used to sit under to clothe the fairies, and they would play these musical instruments and they would dance, and I mean I would spend hours with them, and it all came back. It's like having full recall for like every day of your life that you ever woke up in a particular area of the world. And when I came out of it, I came out crying because it was just, I don't know, it's a lot like going to what Jill shared. It was a lot like, it was just so glad, I was glad to be there. I was glad that nothing kept me from it anymore, but I also got a wisdom out of it. And this is why I wanted to share it. It never occurred to me in that lesson that we worked out recall and remembrance and memory. It never occurred to me until I had this direct experience that actually recall is literally resetting the time-space continuum. That literally, and what happened this morning is the reset of the past memory and human time, which is 4 to 5 years old, literally reset back into this time. It reset, and this is very significant, and I may not be able to get it across, but I'm going to try, because what I realize is that in vertical time, in eternal temporal time, when they come into unity, there is no separation between the past and the present or the future. There's none. There's only what it's like when we're always in be here now, when we're always only here, only now. And I realized that it was like a magical moment where something that timelines that last a lot longer than a human life were being reestablished here, and those relationships between all the aspects of this planet and all of her children or all her forms were restoring themselves and coming back into, were able to come back into relationship again. So those, I really am pushing that particular lesson, because every time we have a recall, we reestablish what we once remembered in actuality, not in memory. We literally bring it back here. We bring it into now, and we bring those relationships back into now, and we bring the larger fields of consciousness of which we're a part back into now. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you, those of you that stayed, which is everybody, by the way. And thank you, Jim and Janice, for setting the field tonight and every time you do this. And my real prayer is that we continue to let ourselves loosen up and be experientially real, and let this monadic intelligence of what really is to be multidimensional beings operating in multi-layered intelligence in a multifractal world. I'm complete.